Hello and welcome. My name is Christina Bowser, and I'm here today with Amy Lipinski, my colleague here at Extended Disc. Welcome, everybody.
Hello, welcome.
Today, our 15-minute webinar is the finale to our four webinar session on the overviews of each of the disc styles. And today, we'll be talking about the C style. As with most of our webinars, we will be recording this in case you need to share it or review it later. And as always, unfortunately, we don't have time for questions because we're just going to pack everything in. So, Amy, let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, Christina. So before the webinar, we were just talking a little bit, and I know one of the more common questions I get asked all the time is, so what's the best style for a leader or a salesperson or for whatever role I'm in? Or, maybe with DISC, should I be focusing on what I don't have and what's on the bottom of my graph? And we always talk about these key points because they're just that. They're the fundamentals. They're the key points that we really need to stress to everyone that all of us, 100% of the individuals that take the assessment are a combination of all the styles. We have all four styles, and there is no right or wrong, good or bad, better or worse. They have their similarities, they have their differences, and most importantly, too, just like individuals, right? They all have their strengths and they all have areas that they can work on and develop and improve in. So there is no one size fits all or one best. It's really learning about what comes naturally in our energy and how they show up and how we can modify. And so those are our key points. And so today we're going to be taking a look at our C styles, like Christina had mentioned.
Yeah, I think one of the things we say, sometimes I feel kind of corny about saying it, but it's so impactful is that, the point of the assessment is, it does not assume that you're broken. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. But if we are just simply more consciously aware of what our strengths are, by golly, we can use them. And if we're more aware of, areas that we may need to develop about ourselves, sometimes just that conscious awareness about it gives us the ability to modify to make those improvements.
And I think on top of that is that it also gives us the insights of how others perceive our style, right? Because oftentimes I think about my own style and I never knew that others may perceive it that way.
Absolutely.
So it's a key learning point. It might not necessarily describe who you are per se, but it's how people are perceiving maybe one of your behaviors.
Right. So let's go ahead and finish off today with our C styles. So if you're familiar with the extended DISC model, basically I say we call it a model, but it's essentially a map. Wherever you're graphed on this map identifies your DISC style. And in this case, we're focusing on the C quadrant. So for any of you that are graphed in the C quadrant, you are what we call a task-oriented style. You're someone that prefers to focus more on task and things over people and emotions. And it's not that you cannot focus on people emotions, but it's just our natural preference. And C styles also tend to be on what we call the reserved half of the model, meaning that they prefer the here and now. They like things that are proven and known, and they prefer stability and detail and structure.
I think you called them once before the Googleistas of the styles,
Yeah.
right? They're the ones who are always going to Google it. Oh, I'll check on that for you. Let me ask Alexa, right?
There's no such thing as too much data sometimes.
Never. So when we think about our C styles in that spirit, we describe them as being very analytical, systematic. They're the ones that walk in and straighten things up, add, structure and discipline to whatever they might be doing. They're very detailed oriented. They want every piece of information that's possible to get, right? They tend to be quiet. They're going to kind of just keep to themselves. They're very much the perfectionist. Their focus is really on quality, precision, and they want to get it right the first time and every time. So they will keep researching and looking at the data until they feel comfortable that it is absolutely spot on. They tend to be cautious just for that same reason, right? They don't want to take any big risks. They want to make sure it's going to be the right thing. And they also tend to be the most formal of our styles. So you're going to see them just in a very formality type of conversation. It won't be like, hey, what's up? Hi, hello, how are you today? Right. And I think it kind of talks to that task. They're very formal because they focus on the task versus really connecting with the person or emotions, that it's a way to keep them more structured, because they're all about their structure and discipline. So when we think about their focus, my C styles want to analyze tasks and things, right? My Ds wanted to control them. My Cs just want to analyze them. They want to look it over. They focus on everything that is going on, right? Let me just keep analyzing and looking at it so that I make sure it's correct. Under pressure, we always say we become more of who we are. So my C styles go more to that task, more to analyzing things, and they appear overly critical. They start to nitpick every single little thing,
They
right?
always say they want to dot their I's, they want to cross
Cross
their
their
T's.
T's. Yeah. Their biggest fear is criticism of their work, somebody finding a mistake, right? They want to be right. They're the perfectionist. They want quality. And so they fear somebody finding that mistake, which is why they focus on analyzing it all. Their attitude towards change, prove it to me, right? Prove to me that we need to change. And it's no surprise by what we've been saying over and over and over again, their attitude towards action, let's do it right. What they don't want to do anything unless we do it right the first time. And if you don't do it right the first time, you must have time to redo your work.
Exactly. And as we go through this, as we've gone through with the other three DISC styles, remember that when we are explaining C style in this case, that we're talking about a C style in its purest form, and that, as Amy mentioned earlier, we are 100% of all styles. In fact, most of us are a combination of more than one style. We have a style that we tend to lead with. And, I jokingly say, even as Amy and I, we actually happen to be the same S style, but she's more on the C side. She's an SC and I'm an SI. And I was just thinking to myself and laughing, she's reading every single word that's on the slide. And so
I can't help but doing it, especially when I talk about my C styles. But
that's right.
It's a great point, Christina, in that we are really extracting if somebody were only a C style,
Correct.
but we all have a blend of the style. So this is that kind of to the extreme, what it would look like, just so we can clearly see those similarities and differences.
So just to warn you ahead of time, I am not going to read everything on this slide. So just in terms of identifying C styles, C styles, as Amy mentioned, they're very focused more on detail. They tend to be quieter and more cautious. They will ask you a lot of questions if they're interested in the topic. And because they don't tend to express their views, because they're quieter, and especially disagreeing views, they sometimes come across to the rest of us as being more timid. And maybe, again, that's not something a C style would use to describe themselves, but part of the purpose and intent of this assessment is for us to understand, how do we show up in front of others. They're going to, they're the ones that are going to read the emails. They're going to send lengthy emails. They're going to ask a lot of questions. They're not going to be pushed into making quick decisions. And one of the things I always find very interesting is, for the C styles, their choice of feedback is often what I would consider much more economical. So, if you think about the I style, lives in the world of superlatives. If you say, here's my idea, they're going to say, that's fabulous, that's wonderful. And if you bring that same excitement, you tell maybe your boss, about your great idea, and then, you wait for this wonderful pat on the back and they say, oh, that sounds good. For an I style, that can feel very deflating. That does not feel like it's positive feedback. But we need to remember, from the C style's perspective, when they tell you something is fine or they tell you something is good, that can be very positive feedback for the C style. So Amy, let's talk a little bit about their communication styles, how C styles tend to communicate.
So their communication styles, and now pressure's on not to read it bullet by bullet, right? um, so when we think about our C styles, they want all the data. So they're much more comfortable with written communication. They're not going to really respond well. I mean, I almost say like email is the C style's favorite mode because they have time to think it through. They have time to process it. They have time to data check it. And so they're going to love when you send them that kind of almost a paper trail as well, because they're going to probably print off that email and file it because they want to have that to refer back to. And Christina had mentioned that they, engage in that conversation or asking questions when they're interested in a topic. But when it's kind of maybe something that's a disagreeing view, they're going to stay away from that. They're all about facts and details. I'm still going in order. I know. I just can't help it.
Amy,
I'm gonna embrace my
you
style.
Just do you. That's right.
I'm gonna embrace it, right? So they're gonna communicate with facts and details. So, like Christina mentioned, their emails are going to be long and lengthy, but they will also be logically organized and very organized. They will be numbered and bullet pointed, and probably be everything you need in that email. And they will appreciate if you read it as well.
Are you looking at me when you say that?
And I'm just saying, C styles tend to go, well, I put that in the email. Did you read it?
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes because they're so into the details, they miss the big picture, right? We say, what's the saying? I always forget it. Like
they can't see the forest from the trees.
Yes, they can't see the forest through the trees, right? Because they're so focused on the one little tree in front of them. They're not going to really share their opinions or things that they just don't, think are important, right? They're about the facts. They're task oriented. So they're not going to really engage in that small talk or things that might not help move to that perfection of the task. And they tend to be very diplomatic in their approach, their words, because they're very objective in their approach. So they're able to bring that objectivity to almost a place of diplomacy when they speak. And especially with maybe giving feedback, right? If they stay more diplomatic and not overuse their strength to a criticism, it can be very effective. And they tend to be more controlled and deliberate, right? Just like in going through each bullet point, very deliberate. I'm going to hit
there
every
are people
one,
in the
right?
audience that are very appreciative of that
versus going, which one is she on? Yep.
So just to kind of finish up, like, because we like to do everything in those 4 steps, and if you forget what those 4 steps are, just go to our website, Effective Communication in 4 Steps. But just what can I as a C style do? What things can I make some adjustments to, or just simply be more aware of that when I'm interacting with different styles that would make that interaction much more successful? So for the for the C style, perhaps just think about talking more, that chit chat that may not be so comfortable. If you just ask maybe like, oh, how was your weekend? That's sometimes very helpful in interacting with your more people-oriented style.
And I always say, actually listen to the response and maybe ask a follow-up question, right?
Try to be more open and expressive. That reservedness that C styles have. Remember, you might be intently listening, but sometimes how that comes across to others. For the C style and for the more reserved styles, that energy, we all have energy. It's just not always present on our surface. And for some people, it's hard for them to read us. Think about being more flexible. Sometimes mistakes are part of the learning process. And as uncomfortable as it might be, keep moving forward. Keep the big picture in mind. For pacing, remember, D's and I's are your active styles. They tend to thrive in fast-paced environments, whereas C's and S's prefer to kind of slow it down, gather all the information, process it before making mistakes. But sometimes, by speeding it up, understanding that it's just part of the process, you may get to your endpoint much quicker. And then just, again, that self-awareness that maybe you might be very engaged in the team meeting because you're listening and you're taking notes and you're going to review those notes and process it. But because there's no outward um, behavior that we can kind of feed off of, you can come across sometimes to us as cold or impolite or distant. So again, it's just an awareness.
Absolutely. It's that focus, that intense focus that others perceive differently. So, thank you all for joining us today and talking about our C styles. Next Wednesday, March 11th, we will be doing another mini webinar about the extended disc model and what the tool measures and what it doesn't measure. So, please join us from 3 o'clock to 3:15 Central Standard Time. You can join that webinar or reserve your spot for it by going to extendeddisc.org and in the upper right hand corner clicking on webinar. So thank you all for joining today, and
Have a great day. For
yeah,
those of you, some of you had questions, just go ahead and put them in the Q&A section because we won't be taking live questions, unfortunately. Or reach out to us at info@extendeddisc.org. Again, have a great day.